Hey everyone, before we dive into the podcast today, I want to share with you something really special that we have coming up in about 6 or 7 weeks. On October the 16th, our fall cohort and certification for becoming a real life process coach will begin. And if you're interested in getting certified around the tools of the real life process and the assessments that we use, the Enneagram being one of them that I'm going to talk about today on the podcast, then maybe you want to check out our certification. Maybe you have always wanted to help others live from rest, not rush. Maybe you're already working as a coach or a spiritual director or a trainer or a workshop leader, and you know that this content that we have would be a great addition and tool in your tool belt. Then I invite you to go over to the website at thereallifeprocess.com and check out the Get Certified tab, download the information, and see if it might be a great fit for you. It's a 6-week training, 6-week certification program. You have all the tools and all the content of the real life process to use in the work that you're doing and how God has called you to serve other people. So come on over and check it out for this fall's cohort certification group. Well, welcome back, everyone, to the Doing What Matters podcast. I am your host, Teresa McCloy, and we love gathering around conversations about really leaning in and doing what matters. And on the podcast, I usually either talk to someone that's really made some significant changes and shifts in their life, or I share a story from my own story about what has helped me to make those significant changes. So today on this episode, we are going to talk about a tool that we use here at the Real Life Process, but a tool that I've used personally for years, and that is the tool of the Enneagram. I want to dive back into this. We did several episodes, a month or two back, just kind of re-exploring the Enneagram. But it is a question I get asked so many times when I'm out speaking, and a tool that recently I've been doing several in-person workshops around. And so I have kind of done some work in reframing some statements that come from the Enneagram. And I really think it's about changing some of the narrative. So that's what we're going to dive into today. If you're not familiar with the tool of the Enneagram, go back and listen to some of my early podcast episodes or just some recent work that I've done here on the podcast. But what the Enneagram really helps you to discover is these 3 centers of intelligence: the head, the heart, and the gut or the body. And within those 3 centers, we usually kind of operate in our operating system pretty heavily out of one of those centers. But what's interesting is we have a narrative. We have the crazy tapes that are playing in our head out of all 3 centers. And so today on this podcast, I'd like to talk about those centers. What are those narratives, those crazy tapes, and how might we shift them into something more positive, more in a true or self, the true self side of who we are. Many times I talk about, how are you on your best day and how are you on your worst day? Or we flip in and out of that all throughout the day. And how can we change that thinking behavior, change that mindset into a growth mindset? So I want to explore changing the narrative today from these 3 centers. And I'm going to talk really broad today. We could dive into each of the 9 types that are around the Enneagram circle. I'm really just going to talk about the 3 centers. And I just want you to listen in today of what are you telling yourself and how would you like that to shift into a growth mindset? Not just saying, well, that's just the way I am. That's the way I think. That's always the way I feel. I don't know. I always react that way. How could we change that language? So I'm going to start this conversation at the top of the circle with what we call the body centers or the gut centers. If you've explore the Enneagram a little bit, you know that these are the nines, the eights, the ones. Those are the numbers, the types that sit in this body center. And many times in this body center, let's explore these three types. Many times uh, they're saying things like, I've had enough. They all do it differently. But what if they could shift that statement from I've had enough to something like, uh, I want to explore this differently? What might be possible in this situation? Staying open, kind of open handed, open hearted, open mind, instead of shutting that down with I've had enough. So each of these might do it differently. For example, a healthy eight, if you resonate with the eight or you connect to it in the 8-2-5 harmony, instead of saying, I've had enough, maybe it's this place of, let's discuss this openly and find a solution together. So pulling in that heart space, pulling in the exploration of the wisdom. Instead of, I've had enough, I'm done, which is kind of on the unhealthy side, the adaptive side. How could you open it up to say, let's discuss this openly and work together to find a solution? Or for the type nines. So when a nine is healthy, they're receptive and easygoing and supportive. But when they get to that place where they're done and they don't want to do the conflict to come to a resolution, they're like, I've had enough. That's the crazy tape. So how could we change that narrative for the type nines to, I need some time to reflect and to understand? So I love that statement for a nine. My husband's a type nine, and it just reminds me to give him space to reflect and understand so that we can come to a solution or a resolution of the situation together. So to be in the desired harmony of speaking up for themselves and saying, I just need some time to reflect and understand, instead of, I've had enough, I'm done, I'm walking away. So, and for the type ones that bring us so much great goodness, when they're healthy, they're seeking a strong sense. They have such a strong sense of right and wrong and the desire to live in the right way and improve the world. But when it gets super frustrating for them and they get to that, I've had enough, they might say, I believe there's a better way that we could approach this. When I hear that sentence, I just hear the type ones taking a breath and saying, I believe there's a better way that we could approach this. And that feels good to them because they're leaning into creating that goodness that they bring to the world, but they're not shutting down. So you hear, as we change the narrative, as we shift from I've had enough in these body spaces that feel so much thing in their gut and their body that they just stop the movement, you hear being very open-handed and open-hearted and opening their mind. I believe there's a better way, says the one. Let's discuss this openly and find a solution, says the eight. And the type nine saying, I need some time to reflect and understand. The nine brings peace, the one brings goodness, and the eight brings power. And we need all of those things when they're open and in that place. So that's our gut type and how they might change the narrative. Let's look at also our head types. How might they change their narrative? Now, remember, when I work with the Enneagram, I always talk about it through this lens of the harmony triads. And some people study the Enneagram a little bit differently, but I love the harmony because it gives us that idea that we're connected to all three centers. We actually, I believe by God's design as a person of faith, that we have all three of these centers that we were designed with. We live heavily out of one, but we actually connect to all three. So as we move into the head, the 8, the 5, and the 2 connect together, the 8 being the body, the 5 being the head, and the 2 being the heart. The type 5 in this head space, these people are really looking to have a healthy expression that comes from a place of trust, not only in themselves, but in others. So the 5, the 6, the 7 that are in this headspace, like they're leaning in. I need security. I need safety. So for the 5, well, actually, for all 3 of the head types, what's going on for them is kind of a statement many times of, I won't have enough. I won't have enough information, is what the type 5 is kind of thinking of. I need more wisdom, more knowledge. That's what they bring us, is wisdom. So they might say, instead of shutting down with the statement and closing off of, I won't have enough, no matter what I do, I won't have enough information, they might say something like, how can I gather more information and resources to ensure I'm prepared? How can I take action through my body to gather more? And that will assure me in a loving way that I'm prepared. So instead of, I won't have enough, how can I gather more information and resources to ensure, give me that safety that I'm prepared? That's being a healthy 5 and not being overwhelmed by the demands of the world and feeling like you're incompetent. So for the 6, this loyalty and faithfulness that they bring to the world, the beautiful part of devotion, they can feel very responsible and reliable. And they often fear being without that support. So instead of saying, I won't have enough connection, I won't have enough support and guidance and kind of relationships, how about if they change the narrative to an openness of, I trust my network, I trust my friends, I trust my coworkers, whatever it might be. I trust my network and abilities to navigate this situation. In other words, I have the support I need. I have the support. For the 5s, it's about, I have the resources, or I can go gather those resources. And for the 6, it's leaning into the trust of the friends, the network. I have what I need to navigate this situation. Now, the 7, also in this head type, overthinking, overgoing in the head, but a healthy 7 that's joyful and multi-talented, their fear of being trapped in pain is kind of what keeps them thinking. I'm either trapped in pain or I feel like I've been deprived. So instead of saying I won't have enough, how about I appreciate what I have and I find creative solutions when I feel that I don't have or if needed. Now, I want to tell a story here from these head types. I have really good friends that are head types. I have family members that kind of operate out of the head space. And especially in this type 7, I have a really good friend that I lost about a year ago. You've heard me talk about her on the podcast. She's actually been on the podcast. And Terry was a full-on type 7. And many times she would say, I want to live from the buffet of life. I don't want to be deprived of anything. She was actually even in recovery. And so, she had used that to escape her pain. But I watched her move to a very healthy place in the last 10 years of her life to say, I appreciate what I have. And it wasn't a lot because she had lost a lot of things in her life. But she appreciated and worked daily as a 7 to appreciate what she had and find creative solutions to have what she needed. And she had learned to live from a place of beautiful joy and fulfillment and experiences in life because she stopped the narrative of, I won't have enough. Now, was it daily? Absolutely. For all of us, changing the narrative is a daily thing. Whether that narrative is the head narrative of I won't have enough, or the body narrative of the body narrative of I've had enough, or the heart narrative of I'm not enough. Those are all the narratives that are going on that unfortunately our brain wants to tell us out of almost that flight, fight, and freeze place that we have, keeping us safe. So let's look at the heart center. The heart centers of the 2s, the 3s, and the 4s. Remember, we're all connected. 852 369 741. Those are the harmonies, head, heart, and body. And when we look at the head types and we look at the narrative that they're having of I'm not enough, comes from shame. It comes from a place of almost sorrow and guilt. But how does the type 2 who brings love into the world but can say, I'm not loving enough, I'm not enough? How can they change the narrative and open their hands to say, I offer love and support in my unique way? I was just actually with a 2 today in a workshop and a retreat day that I was leading. And to watch her lean into, I can be a beautiful, healthy 2 who has my boundaries and loves and supports in my own unique way. And I'm very aware of where I need to say my yeses and my nos. Because one of the things that stood out for her in some training that we have done is every time I say a yes, and I say, I'm not enough, so I'm going to say yes, I actually am saying no to something else. And that no might be the most important thing that I have. And I said yes once too often because I felt like I wasn't enough. But how can a 2 lean in and say, I offer love and support in my own unique way, and what I do is enough? And for the type 3, which if you've listened to me talk about the Enneagram, you know this is my home type, brings effectiveness. The type 3 is amazing at their effectiveness, but when they're healthy, they're into that excelling and driven and oriented toward success, but they want to be affirmed, and they can often feel and tell themselves that, I'm not doing enough. I'm not enough. But what if very open-handedly they say, I value my efforts and accomplishments, and I'm always growing. I'm always on the journey. I'm never going to be enough. And can I say that in a positive way to say, I value my efforts. I value what I did today. When I lay my head down on the pillow, it was enough because I'm always growing. Feeling that growth opportunity instead of shaming ourselves to, I'm not enough. And lastly, the type 4, who brings us creativity and is an individual and loves that introspective, unique expression that they have, and many times can get way down in the depth of their feelings to say, I'm not enough. No matter what I do, I'm not enough. How about them leaning in with open hands, open heart, open mind, open body to say, I embrace my unique qualities, and I know that I have a special place in the world. I know that I am doing exactly what God designed for me to do, special. And being special is actually how God sees you. So when heart types move into this healthy, deep understanding and their worth, and then they separate the validation, this self-awareness and compassion allows them to internalize the truth that they are enough. Just like moving into the statements for the head type, allow you to internalize that you are. And for the body types, internalize it. If you hang around with me long enough, listen to the podcast long enough, read the book, all the different content that we have out there here at the Real Life Process, you will hear me talk about internal and external. And when my internal congruency of who I am aligns with my external doing, that's when I know that I'm living from rest, not rush. And what I'm allowing my brain to tell myself is a part of that journey. So you may want to go back and re-listen to this podcast and just fast forward right to your home types, right to your center, whether you feel like you resonate out of the head center or the heart center or the body, the head center, the body center or the heart center. And maybe exploring the Enneagram, this is the first time you've ever heard some of this language. That's okay. We have plenty of resources for you at thereallifeprocess.com. Actually, if you click on the podcast, you can get a free typing guide and you could read more about the Enneagram and discover it a little bit more and really change that narrative that's in your head, the crazy tape, as I say, that plays sometimes, that plays over and over. And sometimes we can get stuck in it throughout the day. And so practicing to take a pause and a breath to say, not today, not today. Today I'm going to change the narrative and I'm going to move away from I'm not enough, I've had enough, those types of statements or there won't be enough, to really reframe that into a growing mindset. And if you decide that you'd really like to dive in a little bit deeper, you'd like to learn more about these tools, you can check out some places on our website to do that. Maybe even something like this is a tool that you've been looking for, as I talked about at the beginning of the podcast, that you're like, I'd like to use some tools like this, either to learn how to work with some tools to help people rewrite their stories and to live from a place of rest, not rush. And those are the kind of tools and the kind of certifications, the kind of communities that we build here at the Real Life Process. So if you haven't been hanging around with us or you're getting reacquainted, thanks for listening in. Thanks for diving with me into this idea of changing the narrative that's in your head. One of the ways that I have to work at changing the narrative is actually to slow myself down. And one of the ways that I do that is each and every day, I try to capture a moment in that day that has been the highlight moment, the extraordinary moment of the day. And I actually do that on a social media post on Facebook. If you'd love to follow me, come on over and follow me personally at Teresa McCloy. I also share a lot of those on Instagram. You can find me there as well. And you can find out more about the Real Life Process through some of those things as well. But I post that every day to remind me that there's been something extraordinary in the day that I want to remember. I want to give a nod to. I want to be grateful for, because every ordinary day does have an extraordinary moment. We just have to look for them. So I hope you'll look for yours today. I'd love to connect with you. You can always connect with me over social if you would like to, or you can send me an email at teresa@thereallifeprocess.com. Check out more in our show notes of some different links and resources that we have to our upcoming certification cohort this fall and to other places where you can get Enneagram resources and those types of things. Thanks for being with me on the podcast today. This is one of the tools that I have used significantly in my life, as well as many of our coaches have used this tool, and as well as other personality tools, to really discover and to continue to do what matters. And so thanks for joining us on the Doing What Matters podcast. We'll be back next week with more conversation about living our lives from a place of rest and not from rush. Have a great week, everyone.